When we discuss Formula One, we often focus on the most successful and dominant teams in the sport's history. But what about the most disastrous teams in F1 history?
It's realised!
And no, we're not talking about Haas or any of today's struggling teams. These modern underdogs are leagues above the truly disastrous teams that F1 has witnessed. We are talking about teams so incompetent, so embarrassingly awful, that they've been virtually erased from history. One of these teams was so disastrous, so beyond belief, that F1's governing body had to step in and ban them for life. That's how bad they got. Who were these mechanical misfits? What led to their epic failures? And who is the greatest disaster of all time? Here are the worst teams in F1 history. Trust me, by the time we're done, you'll look at today's backmarkers with newfound respect. Who says you don't need money to survive in Formula One? That's a myth, and one team learned that the hard way. That's the Coloni F1 team. Coloni single-handedly proved that you need not just money, but buckets of it to survive and compete in F1. But their problems didn't stop at empty pockets. They were the underdogs who brought a knife to a gunfight, or more accurately, a pistol to a nuclear war. They never stood a chance. On paper, Coloni had potential. They were well managed, had quality staff, and even boasted some worthy drivers over the years. But without the cash to buy top-notch equipment, they were doomed from the start. This was a common issue for smaller teams in that era, but Coloni took it to extremes. This team didn't know when to throw in the towel. You know that saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again? Well, Coloni took that advice and ran it into the ground. Literally. For 5 agonizing years, that's between 1987 and 1991, they showed up to races with all the competitiveness of a snail in a jetpack factory. No thanks to their engine. In F1, the engine is the heart of the car, and race outcomes hinge on its reliability. But Coloni made a shocking choice. They decided to run a Subaru engine, which was used by the Ferraris and Alfa Romeos in the 1970s. Unfortunately for them, it was now the late 1980s, and that engine was a relic. It was like showing up to a modern battle with outdated weapons. They refused to advance, likely because their pockets weren't deep enough. This resulted in the Italian team having a spectacularly unsuccessful F1 journey. They racked up the most DNQ, did not qualify, and DNPQ, did not pre-qualify, records ever. In their last 3 years, they entered 46 Grand Prix and didn't finish a single one. In their final 2 years, they didn't even qualify for any races. While Coloni at least made it to the starting grid, EuroBrun couldn't even manage that in their final 2 seasons. Back in the day, F1 wasn't the automatic ticket to race day that it is now. Teams had to prove their worth in pre-qualifying sessions, and EuroBrun failed that test spectacularly. In their second season, they didn't qualify for a single race, not one. But they didn't start out as total losers. In their rookie year, EuroBrun's drivers actually made it to the grid, but they had a problem. Once the lights went out, so did everything else. Engines, gearboxes, batteries, clutches, you name it, it broke. Let's just say they had the most unreliable cars ever seen. Realizing they needed a change, EuroBrun did what any sensible team would do. They tried to sign new drivers, but in true EuroBrun fashion, they botched even that. They signed Christian Danner to replace founder Oscar Larrauri, only to discover that Danner couldn't actually fit in the car, so Larrauri kept his seat. Like their buddies at Coloni, EuroBrun had a love affair with outdated tech. In 1989, they were still running around with a 1984 Alfa Romeo chassis. You've got to wonder what was going through the minds of these team owners. If your pockets are emptier than a politician's promises, maybe stick to being a fan instead of a team owner. EuroBrun's F1 adventure proves that sometimes dreams should stay dreams, especially when they involve multi-million-dollar racing cars you can't afford to run properly. If Coloni existed today, their owner could have avoided disaster by binge-watching our videos. But Back then, they didn't have YouTube or even dial-up internet. Their most advanced tech was probably a fax machine that doubled as a pasta maker. But you, lucky viewer, have it easy. No need to buy a failing F1 team to learn from catastrophic mistakes. Just hit that subscribe button, and voila, you're an instant F1 guru. No super license required. While some teams faltered due to lack of funds, a team became one of the worst the sport has ever seen because they were just too overconfident. We're talking about MasterCard Lola's F1 team. Their entry into Formula One in the late 1990s is a perfect example of how not to approach the sport. Originally planned for 1998, Lola's F1 debut was hastily accelerated by a full year at the request of their primary sponsor, MasterCard. This last-minute decision in late 1996 left the team scrambling to develop a car while their competitors, such as Stewart, were already unveiling their finished products. In a move that defied logic, MasterCard Lola took an unprecedented shortcut. They essentially adapted an Indy car, lightened it, and dubbed it an F1 contender. The rush to meet the 1997 season start was so severe that the team skipped crucial development steps. Most shockingly, they never tested their car in a wind tunnel, which is a fundamental process in F1 car development. To put this in perspective, it's like stepping into the boxing ring against Tyson Fury without any training. The outcome would be disastrous. Despite these glaring oversights, Lola maintained an almost delusional level of confidence. They boldly predicted they would outperform Stewart and easily clear the 107% qualifying mark. However, reality soon shattered their illusions. On the track, Lola's car proved disastrously inadequate. It suffered from excessive drag on straightaways, hampering top speed, and generated insufficient downforce in corners, crippling its ability to navigate turns effectively. The result was a humiliating failure to qualify, missing the mark by a staggering 15 seconds in their first and only race attempt. One race, that's all it took for this dream, or should we say nightmare, to come crashing down. Lola ended up with a debt so big, it could have bought a small country. We're talking about £6 million of debt. This team and its owners learned the F1 lesson the hard way, giving us all a masterclass in how not to join Formula One. At least they set a record for the shortest and most expensive F1 career in history. Just when you thought you'd seen the pinnacle of F1 disasters with MasterCard Lola, along came a team that would redefine the meaning of failure in motorsport: the Life F1 team. This team grabbed the chassis from First's F1 team's failed Grand Prix attempt, hoping to showcase their innovative W12 engine. Instead, they ended up demonstrating just how hopeless both their engine and their entire F1 endeavor were. Here's how it all went down. The original designer of the chassis, which was initially meant for the first team, labeled it a time bomb and went so far as to take legal action to dissociate his name from what he considered a death trap. Life purchased this questionable chassis, fitted their engine, and brazenly decided to race it. They modified the chassis to fit their engine, which made the driver incredibly vulnerable and the car even more hazardous. Ironically, the car was so slow that its lack of speed became its safety feature. The extent of Life's failure is hard to overstate. Out of 14 races they attempted, they failed to pre-qualify for a single one. Their cars were, on average, a staggering 30 seconds per lap slower than even the struggling EuroBrun entries. While most failed F1 entries managed to at least make it to the final qualifying round once or come within a few seconds of the pace in pre-qualifying, Life consistently languished around 20 seconds off the pace in every pre-qualifying session they entered. Life F1 will be remembered not just as one of the worst Formula One teams in history, but as one of the most ill-conceived operations in any field. However, they aren't even the worst team in F1 history. That honor belongs to none other than Andrea Moda. Think you've heard about the worst Formula One team ever? Think again. Meet Andrea Moda, the team so catastrophically bad that F1 itself had to ban them. They make other notorious failures like Life, MasterCard Lola, EuroBrun, and Coloni look like champions in comparison. This disaster began when an Italian shoe designer bought the Coloni F1 team. What followed was a comedy of errors. From day one, Andrea Moda was a rolling disaster. They missed their first race because they forgot to pay the entry fee. Their second race, the cars didn't even show up on time due to shipping delays. When their drivers dared to complain about this less than stellar start, the owner, Sassetti, fired them both. But wait, it gets worse. At their third race, one driver's license was revoked, and their only qualifying car was a whopping 15 seconds off the pace. They tried to bring back a fired driver, only to learn they'd exceeded the allowed driver changes for the season. The Spanish Grand Prix saw both cars retire before even starting a proper lap in pre-qualifying. In Monaco, Perry McCarthy was badly bruised because the team couldn't be bothered to build him a proper seat. For the Canadian GP, they remembered to ship the cars but forgot the engines. In France, they missed pre-qualifying because they got stuck in traffic. The team's incompetence reached new heights when they tried to run on a dry track with wet tires at Silverstone. But the real kicker? At the Hungaroring, they sent McCarthy out with only 45 seconds left in pre-qualifying. Not even enough time for a warm-up lap. The final straw came in Belgium. Sassetti was arrested for fraud, and F1 finally had enough. They banned Andrea Moda for bringing the sport into disrepute. There were even allegations that the team had deliberately endangered McCarthy's life due to an ongoing feud. They didn't just fail, they failed spectacularly, setting new lows in incompetence, mismanagement, and sheer absurdity. In the end, they were kicked out for the safety of everyone involved.